Hello, my name is Suman Saha, and I am a postdoc in the Computer Vision Lab at ETH Zurich with Professor Luc Van Gool. Our paper is titled Learning to Relate Depth and Semantics for Unsupervised Domain Adaptation. Obtaining semantic annotation is expensive and labor-intensive, so we rely on synthetic to real use case for unsupervised domain adaptation, or UDA. The goal of this paper is to learn visual task relationships to improve performance on the unseen target domain. We hypothesize that an explicit formulation to relate depth and semantics help us achieve our goal. There are prior works that attempt to exploit depth to improve semantics, but they lack an explicit formulation. In this paper, we propose an explicit formulation to relate depth and semantics. We humans often relate semantics and discrete depth levels. For example, the motorbike and car are nearby. The trees and street light have a medium range depth, and the sky is far. Our key idea is to exploit this depth level information to learn more intricate relations of semantic classes. To do this, we design a framework which is presented next. Given the inputs, that is the source and target samples, our model predicts the semantics and depth maps. Then these predictions are fed into a CTRL module. However, the depth predictions are continuous valued and they don't carry any discrete depth level information. So the first question is how to extract the depth level information. We swap the continuous depth to a categorical one using the spacing increasing discretization, or SID. Given the depth range, ZMin and ZMax, and the number of depth bins k, SID computes discretization bin using equation 1. We then generate the categorical depth using equation 2. The network still learns to predict tasks independently and thus cannot fully exploit the cross-task relations. So the next question is how to enforce the network to learn cross-task relations. To achieve this, we employ a semantic refinement head, which makes the network predict semantics attenuated by the predicted depth map. Lastly, we ask ourselves how to transfer the knowledge from source to target. For this, we propose a cross-task relation layer. The entropy map generator of the CTRL takes as input the predicted semantics and the depth, and outputs an entropy map, which is then used for domain alignment. Next, look at some qualitative adaptation results on challenging synthetic to real setting. Observe the outlined areas. Our model consistently outperformed the previous state of the art for semantic class bus, bicycle, wall, motorbike, person, and the rider class. Now I will present the quantitative results. Our model outperforms the previous state of the arts on 3 domain adaptation benchmarks. The major gains come from the following classes: wall, motorbike, person, bicycle, and the rider. Next, I will show some teasing visualization of the learned feature embedding. Our proposed CTRL helps to learn more disentangled representations than the previous state of the art, as can be seen by clear clusterization of the samples corresponding to the same semantic classes. Better clusters are annotated with circles. Finally, I conclude by highlighting the key contribution of this paper. A depth discretizing technique facilitates learning semantics at different discrete depth level. The semantic refinement head aids in learning task dependencies. A cross-task relation layer helps learning a joint space for domain alignment. For more details, please come by our poster. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Nikola Popovic. I'm a PhD student at the Computer Vision Lab at ETH, and I'm going to present to you the work that I did with my collaborators. Let's look at this image and imagine we would like to apply augmented reality. In order to do that, we need to understand it better. We might want to know the pose of the woman, as well as which animal is present in front of her. Also, we might like to know the normals of some objects of interest and the edges in the background. When we think about multitask learning in general, we ask ourselves, is it necessary or even meaningful to perform each task everywhere? For example, the task of recognizing human body parts is meaningful only in the presence of humans. Similarly, any attempt to estimate the normals of the sky is absurd. When the answer to where each task needs to be performed is known, either by learning or not, we aim to design an algorithm that executes the given multitask instruction in an efficient manner. One solution that comes to mind would be to first predict the requested tasks in a multitask fashion, one by one, and use the task request to construct the composite task. However, this approach is very inefficient. Our proposed composite tasking network takes the input image and passes it through an encoder to produce a rich feature representation, which is then given to the decoder. The decoder is instructed which task to perform where by receiving a pixel-wise task request as an input, which we call the task palette. The encoder then produces the composite task, all in only one forward pass. The network is able to predict different tasks at different locations by using the task conditioning block in the decoder and the skip connections, the green rectangles. The task conditioning block refines the propagated features based on the embedding of the provided task palette. The embedding of the task palette is computed once using the task representation block, and the same embedding is given to all the task conditioning blocks. The task representation block embeds the palette by passing the code of each distinct task through a fully connected network independently. It then broadcasts these individual task embeddings with respect to the palette. The task composition block passes the embedded palette through one-to-one convolutions to obtain per pixel affine transformation parameters. Therefore, the complete conditioning is achieved by applying per pixel affine transformations in these blocks. The features are first normalized just like in batch norm. A similar approach has already been used in conditional GANs. For experiments, we use a single task rule which symbolizes solving specific tasks in computer vision. We use random mosaics with randomly sampled centers and tasks to see how the model reacts to task regions without any specific meaning. Also, we use two semantic rules where the semantic class of a pixel dictates which task will be requested. Here we see that our model is able to predict the standard single task request just like a regular network. We can also see that our network is able to sharply transition from one task to another when using the random mosaic rule. The boundary artifacts are negligible. Finally, we can see that our network is able to sharply transition from one task to another when using the semantic rule. Now, in settings where the rule is known a priori, a network can be learned to predict the task palette. The predicted palette can then be given to the composite tasking network along with the image to predict the composite task. Columns 2 and 3 are the task palette label and the corresponding prediction. In columns 4 and 5, we can see the predicted task palette and its corresponding prediction. The results are almost identical. This approach can be a useful tool for automatic data labeling when we require sparse labels. Let's push our model to its limits by requesting a randomly sampled task at each pixel location independently. We can see that there is a meaningful execution of different tasks all over the image. It is interesting that the model is able to work successfully in this extreme setting. In experiments, we use the popular metric for multitask learning. While testing with the single task rule, we compared the drops in performance to standard single task training. We can see that our proposed network achieves the same performance drop as the single task and multitask baselines when trained on the random mosaic rule. This is interesting since the baselines have more model capacity. Our model seems sufficient in the setting of sparse supervision. At the same time, it is more efficient in terms of memory and computations. A similar behavior is present when training and testing with the semantic rule. To conclude, we introduced the novel concept of composite tasking, we proposed a novel task conditioning model for solving it, and we showed efficient learning of multiple tasks using the proposed model. For more details and applications like task editing and breaking the rule, please look at the paper.
Hi, I'm Jingyun Liang, a PhD student from the computer vision lab, ETH Zurich. Now I'm going to present our work, Flow-based kernel prior. Super resolution is a classical low-level vision problem which aims to reconstruct a high-resolution image from a low-resolution image, but it often assumes the blur color is fixed and known. As a generalized case, blind image SR tries to deal with unknown blur colors. It often estimates the high-resolution image and the blur color at the same time. Generally, we assume the low-resolution image Y is generated by a degradation model, a composition of blurring operation between the high-resolution image X and the blur color K, followed by a downsampling operation with scale factor S and additive noise M. According to the maximum a posterior framework, we can solve the problem by minimizing the data fidelity term that measures the low-resolution image reconstruction error, plus the image prior term theta x that incorporates natural image statistics, and the kernel prior term omega k that incorporates blur color knowledge. Although various image priors have been proposed in recent years, little attention has been paid on kernel prior, which is also important for the blind image SR problem. Flow-based kernel prior, dubbed as FKP, is based on normalizing flow networks. It is composed of several flow blocks. Each block is a succession of invertible transformations, including batch normalization, permutation, and affine transformation layers. Therefore, we can learn a invertible mapping between latent variable zeta k and the blur color k. With only kernel training samples, FKP is trained by the negative log likelihood loss in an unsupervised way. It can be plugged into existing image super resolution frameworks as a kernel prior. Now we introduce two applications of FKP. The first one is DIP FKP. It uses DIP, a randomly initialized encoder-decoder network, as an image prior, which estimates a HR image from a random noise zeta x. At the same time, it uses FKP as a kernel prior to generate a kernel from a random noise zeta k. Then, follow the degradation model, we generate the AR image and train the whole model by minimizing the AR image reconstruction error. Note that we optimize the network parameters and the latent variable for DIP and FKP respectively. DIP FKP can embed kernel prior into the network effectively by moving the kernel prediction along the lumped color manifold. The second application is the kernel GAN FKP. Based on the internal GAN framework, we use FKP to generate the kernel, which is then used to generate the redownscaled AR image following the degradation model. The optimization of the model follows the min-max scheme of GAN. FKP tries to force the discriminator to believe that the image patches extracted from the AR image and the patches from the redownscaled AR image have similar distributions. The discriminator instead tries to discriminate between these two kinds of image patches. The optimization process equals to traversing in the kernel space to find a kernel that the discriminator cannot distinguish. Experiments show that both DIP FKP and kernel GAN FKP outperform their baseline models significantly in kernel and HR image estimation. For more information, please read our paper and scan the QR code to visit our project page. Thanks for your attention.
Hello everyone. Our work, Deep Homography for Efficient Stereo Image Compression, has been accepted by CVPR 2021 as an oral book, and this is our author's information. I will introduce our work in the following orders. As is known to all, images have become the mainstream information carriers. However, images have the following characteristics, and these characteristics make image compression technology more space for development. In particular, for stereo image datasets, how to use the stereo images to guide compression has become an urgent problem. In 2018, Bellow introduced the deformation of super priority network to predict distribution parameters for Gaussian probability model. DSIC is the first deep learning compression algorithm applied to stereo images. It transfers the left eye information to the right eye through the feature domain and causes volume convolution to guide coding with pretty high calculation cost. In homography transformation, images of two views can be converted to each other through an H matrix. And this work proposed a fast and a robust homography estimation model based on deep learning. Inspired by the above works, we proposed the HASIC model. In order to more effectively and efficiently use the shared information of stereo images, we borrowed ideas from the dominant eye and homography. We used mutual information by matching stereo images with homography metrics, and then add this information by warping left eye to the right in codec. What's more, the H matrix can be converted to integer coordinates, which are easy to compress and transmit losslessly in codec. This picture shows the main structure of our work. First, we use regression model to calculate the H matrix. Then we double the main structure from Bellow's work. We use homography to warp the left image into the right at the entrance and exit. Finally, we use the cross-quality enhancement module to enhance stereo images with decoder output and an H matrix. In CQE module, we use rest block structure and warp stereo images for convolution. In entropy model, we use two different models to construct HASIC and HASIC Plus, which pay more attention to speed and performance respectively. In HASIC, we change Gaussian mixture model to forecast a stereo entropy model. In the right eye codec, there is one connection from the left eye, and this structure can better adapt to GPU parallel acceleration. While in HASIC Plus, we use the context-based stereo entropy model to decode by pixel loop. In this way, the autocorrelation of the images can be more fully utilized, but it is computationally intensive and cannot be accelerated by GPU. We set up one pre-training in stage 1 to train the regression model. In codec training, the loss function has two components, image noise and expected bitrate. The next are our experiments. We use in-stereo 2K and KD as our datasets. We train the two different models mentioned above, whose differences only lays in the entropy models. These are the qualitative experiments results. And these are the quantitative experiments results. Comparing BDBR and runtime, we found that HASIC Plus sacrifices some speed performance in exchange for probability prediction to improve compression performance, and our HASIC Plus as well as HASIC achieved the SOTA effect. Finally, we conduct a ablation study to verify each module's effectiveness, and our result figures are displayed here. In conclusion, we use homography to coach stereo compression and change the entropy model to use mutual information. In future, we will focus on stereo image datasets with large parallax and low repeatability. Our code has been made public. Welcome to STAR. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I am Berkaya, and I am happy to present you our work Uncalibrated Neural Inverse Rendering for Photometric Stereo of General Surfaces. Photometric stereo aims to estimate surface normals of an object from its light varying images. This problem is usually studied under the calibrated setting, where light source direction and intensity information is given. However, exact calibration of light sources is difficult. On the other hand, uncalibrated photometric stereo estimates surface normals from images with unknown light sources, which makes it more suitable for general usage. Traditional methods in this field rely on simple reflectance models, such as the Lambertian model. Recently, deep learning has shown remarkable results by learning complex BRDF from data. However, deep networks require training with ground truth normals, which are extremely difficult to acquire. Moreover, they consider only the light due to the primary source. For this reason, they cannot handle interreflections on concave surfaces. We propose a novel framework for the uncalibrated photometric stereo problem. Given a set of photometric stereo images, light estimation network initially predicts the light source direction vectors and intensities. Then, inverse rendering network uses the images and the estimated light sources to recover surface normals and reflectances. As we use the reconstruction loss on the rendered image, our inverse rendering network does not require ground truth surface normals. Moreover, we use an explicit interreflection modeling in rendering equation. It enables us to handle objects with concave parts. To overcome the generalized bas relief ambiguity problem in uncalibrated photometric stereo, we start with light estimation. Light estimation network first extracts image-specific features and aggregates them with a max pooling operation to get global information. The global and image-specific features are used together in classifier layers for prediction of the light sources. Note that we aim to classify for azimuth, elevation and intensity values because it's an easier problem than regression. We train the network using the cross-entropy loss on each class. In the second stage, we perform neural inverse rendering. The parameters of this network are learned at the test time for each object separately, so it doesn't require training with ground truth normals. The network has two branches. The first branch estimates the surface normals, and the second branch estimates the reflectance maps. The estimated normals and the reflectance maps are then used in rendering equation to synthesize input images. Here, instead of relying on the classical rendering equation, we use the interreflection model. To use the interreflection model, we first integrate the surface normals to depth. Then, we check the visibility and the distance between each element on the surface. This allows us to compute the interreflection kernel, and we use this kernel in our rendering equation to get images. We learn the network parameters using the reconstruction loss between rendered images and input images. To make the learning process more stable, we also introduce a weak supervision loss. The weak supervision term basically guides the network by using an initial normal estimate computed using a robust algorithm. We use this term only at the initial stages of the learning to warm up the network. We evaluate the performance of our method on two different datasets. Here, we show the estimated normals on the diligence benchmark. The visual results show that our method performs consistently well on objects with different geometries and surface properties. In this table, we compare our method with classical and learning-based uncalibrated photometric stereo methods. We perform better than all classical methods, and our scores are comparable with the supervised learning-based approaches. To study the interreflecting surfaces, we additionally propose a new dataset. In our dataset, we capture the images with a dome setup. In this setup, the object is placed at the center of a hemisphere. The camera is placed at the top, and light sources illuminate the object from different directions. Our dataset has 6 different objects with complex surfaces, including both convex and concave parts. In this new dataset, we perform significantly better than other approaches. Deep learning methods usually struggle to handle objects with deep concavities, such as the vase, because they do not model interreflections explicitly. On the other hand, classical NIR method on this table models interreflections, but the results show that it is not sufficient. Our method succeeds because we model both interreflections and the reflectance map of the surface at the same time. To sum up, we proposed an uncalibrated neural inverse rendering framework with explicit interreflection modeling. It performs comparable or better than supervised approaches without requiring ground truth surface normals, and it is applicable to a broader range of surfaces. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Mohammad Shahbazi, and I'm going to talk about our work, Efficient Conditional GAN Transfer with Knowledge Propagation across classes. Conditional GANs like BigGAN have shown impressive results in realistic image generation from multi-class datasets like ImageNet. However, they have been struggling with challenges such as requiring lots of training data, long training time, and node collapse. Transfer learning is a standard practice in machine learning that increases the data efficiency and training speed, making it a suitable choice to address the aforementioned challenges. As shown in previous works, using a pre-trained GAN and fine-tuning its generator and discriminator on the target data can increase the image generation quality and training speed. In this work, we propose a method for the conditional GAN transfer with the idea that given a multi-class source dataset for pre-training, knowledge transfer to a multi-class target dataset could be performed by borrowing class-specific knowledge from source classes based on how relevant they are to each target class. In current state-of-the-art class conditional GANs, the classes are represented in the generator as the parameters of the batch normalization layers. Therefore, use class-specific batch normalization parameters to propagate knowledge between source and target classes. We introduce a knowledge propagation block that receives the target class index as input and returns the corresponding batch normalization parameters. For each layer of the generator, we use a different block so that the target classes could borrow layer-specific knowledge from source classes depending on the features each layer represents. Our training pipeline consists of two phases. First, the target batch normalization parameters are learned, and then the generator is further fine-tuned on the target data. The knowledge propagation block contains the batch normalization parameters of the source classes. Given the target index, a set of similarity scores over the source classes is selected for the target class. These scores are then used to linearly combine the source parameters in order to obtain the parameters of the target class. In addition, we add class-specific residual parameters to the resulting target parameters in case a class could not be fully represented based on the source classes. In order to encourage knowledge transfer from source classes, we regularize the L2 norm of the residual parameters. We also regularize the L1 norm of similarity scores to encourage sparsity over the borrowed classes. By learning the similarity scores over the source classes, our method is able to borrow relevant knowledge from source data. However, target classes are still agnostic to one another. In order to enable the model to exploit the common information shared among target classes, we propose to allow the target classes to optimize the source parameters together while learning the similarity scores, making them more suitable for transferring to the target dataset. In the second phase of the training, we fix the learned similarity scores as well as the optimized source representations, and further fine-tune the rest of the generator on the target data. Learning the target batch normalization parameters before fine-tuning provides a better initialization, which results in a more stable transfer. We evaluate the proposed method in terms of image generation quality using FID and KMMD metrics. Our results show improvement over the compared methods, even after the first training phase. In addition, our method is able to speed up the training significantly compared to the baseline. We also provide visual results of using our method to transfer from ImageNet to Places dataset. To better understand the proposed method, we visualize the contribution of different components when transferring from ImageNet to Animal Face dataset. First, we visualize the intermediate representations learned from knowledge sharing between target classes by conditioning the generator on these representations. Moreover, as an example, we visualize the top 3 ImageNet classes contributing to one of the classes of Animal Face, as well as the layer-wise contribution of the knowledge propagation blocks. In summary, we propose a method for efficient conditional GAN transfer by borrowing knowledge from source classes and sharing knowledge from target ones. Our evaluations show improvements in image distribution modeling and significant speed up in the training time. Thank you for your attention. We look forward to seeing you in our poster session.
Hello everyone, welcome to the presentation for our work, Cluster, Split, Fuse, and Update, Meta Learning for Open Compound Adaptive Semantic Segmentation. This is the joint work with Yuhua, Danda, Yawei, Ajat, Wen, Dengxin, and Luke. In this work, we focus on the Open Compound Adaptation problem, abbreviated as OCTA, different from the traditional unsupervised domain adaptation problem and multi-target domain adaptation problem. The target domain of OCTA is a compound of multiple unknown subdomains, and OCTA allows the unseen open domain to show up during inference time. The two main problems need resolving in OCTA is firstly, the target domain is a compound of multiple subdomains, and subdomain labels are unknown, and secondly, open domains are unseen during the training. In order to address the two problems, for the compound target domain, we propose the cluster, split, and fuse modules. For the unseen open domain, we propose the update module, and our fuse and update modules exhibit meta behavior. Then we present the overview of our cluster, split, field, and update modules. In the cluster and split module, we adopt the discrete moduling and divide the compound target domain into multiple known subdomains. Each image sample only belongs to one subdomain. In the field module, we model the target domain continuously by combining the subdomains. In the update module, we online update the model for the unseen domains. Then, we introduce the individual modules in detail. The cluster module is to divide the whole compound target domain into multiple subdomains. We cluster the target domain according to the style of the images, and we exploit the style code to represent the style of different images. Specifically, we feed the image into the style encoder to get the low-dimension style code. Then, the style codes of different image samples are clustered in the k-means way and get the different center style code. Each sample is assigned to one subdomain by finding the nearest center style code. Next, we introduce the split module. We adopt the adversarial learning to align the domain distribution between the source and different target subdomains. In the traditional semantic segmentation network, the patronization layer is adopted, and the domain-specific information is mixed and increases the difficulty of domain adaptation. In our split module, we adopt the clustered subdomain-specific patronization layer. For each of the subdomain from cluster module and the source domain, we have one single patronization layer. It separates the domain-specific information to help train more domain-invariant features, easing the domain adaptation task. In the cluster and split modules, we model the compound target domain into different discrete subdomains. So what's the problem of the discrete modeling? Let's see one example. We assume that our compound target domain is divided into the day subdomain and the night subdomain, but now we have one dusk image. Purely assigning the dusk image to the day subdomain or the night subdomain is not appropriate. The solution is to model the compound target domain continuously, and the dusk image is corresponding to the point between the day image and the night image. In order to model the compound target domain continuously, we propose the field module. In the field module, we adopt the meta-hypernetwork to combine different subdomains. We input the style code of the image into the hypernetwork and output the weight of different subdomains. Then, the weight is used to weight different subdomain branches to get the final output. Then, we introduce the update module to deal with the open domains. In the update module, we adopt the model-agnostic meta-learning MAMO strategy. The MAMO mimics the training and testing phase of the model during the training stage through the inner loop loss and outer loop loss to endow the fast adaptation ability to the model. In order to update the model in the unsupervised way, we introduce additional unsupervised self-entropy loss besides the loss in the field module. During the testing stage, the model is able to be updated within one gradient step in the unsupervised way when the new data comes. From the quantitative and qualitative experimental results, it is shown that our proposed framework outperforms the previous methods. Besides, we also compare the model performance with or without online update on the unseen open domains. It proves the fast adaptation ability of our model benefiting from the update module. As a take-home message, we designed the meta-learning-based framework for the Octa problem composed of cluster, split, field, and update modules. That's all. Thanks a lot.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching this video. We're going to introduce our work, Quasi-Dense Similarity Learning for Multiple Object Tracking. This work is done by Zhangmiao Pang and Qi Li from Zhejiang University, Linlu Chu from Georgia Tech, Xia Li and Fisher Yu from Ed Zurich, Haofeng Chen from Stanford, and Trevor Darrell from UC Berkeley. Multiple object tracking is a fundamental and challenging problem in computer vision, widely used in video analytics, autonomous driving, and robotics. Contemporary MOT methods typically follow the tracking by detection paradigm. That is, they detect objects on each frame and then associate the objects with instant similarity. To measure the similarity, spatial proximity is usually the first priority. Recent work show that if the detected objects are accurate, the spatial proximity between objects in consecutive frames, measured by intersection of unions or center distances and strengthened by motion priors, is a strong prior to associate the objects. But the location heuristic only works well in simple scenarios. If the objects have large displacements or are occluded, or the scenes are crowded, this location heuristic can easily lead to mistakes. However, object appearance similarity usually takes a secondary role to strengthen object association or re-identify vanished objects. Because the appearance features cannot effectively distinguish different objects, the search region is constrained to be local neighborhoods to avoid distractions. On the contrary, humans can easily associate identical objects only through appearance. There are three paradigms to learn appearance similarity: an independent model, or a joint learning model with re-identification loss or triplet loss. We observe there are several limitations of these methods. In A, they regard instance similarity learning as a post hoc stage after object detection. All these methods only use sparse ground truth bounding boxes as training samples. These processes ignore the majority of the regions proposed on the images. They only provide limited supervision by using triplet loss or re-ID loss. We conjecture that in sparse matching, the image and object information is not fully utilized for learning object similarity. Because objects in an image are rarely identical to each other, if the object representation is properly learned, a nearest neighbor search in the embedding space should associate and distinguish instances without bells and whistles. To this end, we propose quasi-dense similarity learning for multiple object tracking. It uses pairwise images for training, extracts quasi-dense samples, and conducts multiple positive contrastive learning to learn the instance similarity. This method can be directly combined with existing detection methods to build QD track without turning to displacement regression or motion priors. With a simpler framework, we obtain state-of-the-art results on MOT, BDD100K, Waymo, and DAO datasets. To be more specific, the quasi-dense samples can cover most of the informative regions on the images, providing both more box examples and hard negatives. The multiple positive contrastive learning also provides valuable supervision signals. In this work, we use faster RCNN with feature pyramid network for object detection. The region proposals in faster RCNN are used as quasi-dense samples to learn the instance similarity in an end-to-end manner. As a training sample is matched to more than one positive sample, we extend the contrastive learning to multiple positive forms that makes the training process feasible. In the learning process, the distances between all positive pairs are optimized to decrease while increase for all negative pairs. We use TSNE to visualize the embeddings. We observe that it is easier to separate objects in the feature space of quasi-dense matching. Although the features are greatly improved, tracking objects only by object feature embeddings is not trivial. For example, if an object has no target or more than one target during matching, the nearest search will be ambiguous. In other words, an object should have only one target in the matching candidates. That is the one-to-one matching principle in this paper. Our main inference strategy is using bidirectional softmax to obtain similarity scores. Objects that satisfy bidirectional consistency will have high similarity scores while low similarity scores for the unsatisfies. Apparently, objects that have no matching target will naturally obtain low similarity scores to all candidates. When testing, our prior objects include tracks, vanished tracks and backdrops. Previous methods usually drop all unmatched objects. It is very likely that a detected object is matched to a dropped unmatched object. Therefore, we keep these unmatched objects as backdrops to facilitate the matching process. For the multi-target cases, we do inter-class duplicate removal by non-maximum suppression. Our method outperforms all existing methods on MOT benchmark without using external training data. It also boots almost 10 points of MOTA and significantly decreases ID switches on BDD100K and Waymo dataset. The ablation studies on BDD100K validation set can show the importance of quasi-dense matching in our inference strategy. We also find our instance feature embeddings are sufficient for multiple object tracking. The location and motion priors barely enhance the performance of our approach. For more information about our work, please visit our project website. Thanks for watching.
I'm going to present learning accurate dense correspondences and when to trust them. In this work, we tackle the problem of dense correspondence estimation. From a pair of reference and query images, we want to find the flow field relating each pixel of the reference to the query. We visualize this by varping the query according to that flow. As you can see, dense flow estimation is prone to failure in case of occlusion. It can also be inaccurate, particularly for large appearance and viewpoint changes, and it is even ill-defined in textureless regions such as the sky. However, lots of applications such as pose estimation require highly accurate and robust matches as input. So how can we know when and where to trust the estimated correspondences? We address this question by proposing probabilistic dense correspondence network. Together with the flow field, we infer a confidence map according to which the red regions are uncertain. And you see that those uncertain regions correspond to the occluded, the ill-defined, and the inaccurate matching regions. Now let's dive into the method. While most methods train a network to predict a flow vector y at each location, our goal is to predict the conditional probability density of each flow vector y given the input images. In practice, the network predicts at each pixel location the parameters phi of this flow density, which encode both flow and uncertainty information. So how do we parameterize this flow density? From this empirical error distribution, we see that errors can be categorized into two populations, inlayers and outliers. Current probabilistic methods mostly rely on a Laplacian model. It has two parameters, the mean, which corresponds to the estimated flow vector, and the variance parameter. We instead use a constrained mixture model. It has m Laplace components. All components have the same mean, but different variances. Moreover, each component is responsible for a different range of uncertainties, roughly corresponding to different regions of the error distribution. Compared to the single Laplace, the incentive of our approach is that it allows to predict for each match the probability of inlayer versus outlier, each model by separate Laplace components. So now, at each pixel location, the network predicts the mean flow vector and the uncertainty components. From those, we then estimate a single confidence value. Because it is difficult to obtain dense ground truth data, most methods rely on self-supervised data. The training image pairs are generated with simple transformations like here. However, for these transformations, the network learns to heavily rely on global smoothness priors and interpolation. But this strategy does not generalize well to real data. It leads to overly confident uncertainty predictions such as here in the sky or in the field. Ideally, we would like the confidence estimation to include all of these areas. So we tackle the uncertainty generalization issue from the data and the network perspective. In terms of data, the major problem is that the synthetic flows are too predictable. We thus introduce small perturbations in the flow that will break its global smoothness. From the architecture perspective, the straightforward choice to predict all parameters of the distribution would be to start from the standard architecture and to increase the number of output channels. However, in that case, the network relies too much on neighboring information when predicting the uncertainty. Therefore, from this standard architecture, we'll build a parallel uncertainty decoder. It inputs the correlation volume and processes the information at each point independently. While this was the results before, our approach leads to much better uncertainties. We obtain the PDCnet architecture by adding our uncertainty decoders in GlueNet Go Core. We train our network using the negative log likelihood loss as the only objective on both self-supervised data and sparse ground truth data. Now let's look at the results. We first show qualitative results on scenes of megadepth. This is the VARP query according to PDCnet, and the unreliable regions are shown in red. To compare, we also train a non-probabilistic network, GlueNet Go Core, on the same data. We see that our probabilistic formulation not only allows to identify accurate from inaccurate regions, but it also improves the flow prediction itself. In this other example, we see that PDCnet does very well in extreme appearance and viewpoint changes. In terms of metrics, PDCnet outperforms previous state-of-the-art on multiple benchmarks such as Megadepth, RobotCar, ETH3D, and Kitty. We also evaluated PDCnet for pose estimation on YFCC by using only the predicted confident matches. Our method outperforms the previous dense state-of-the-art as well as standard sparse methods. With PDCnet, we can also do dense 3D reconstruction. The first step is to find dense confidence matches. We see that our approach finds matches even for large viewpoint changes. We then feed all of these confidence matches to Colmap, and this is the resulting 3D reconstruction of the Aachen city. We see here that buildings are reconstructed with high quality. Finally, PDCnet is applicable for the task of texture transfer, as in this video. Here, our approach finds matches between pairs with extreme appearance variations. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gautam and I will present our work Deep Burst Super Resolution. When we take an image, we obtain a sampled version of the scene, the resolution of which is limited by the imaging sensor. Single image super resolution approaches aim to improve the image resolution using learned image priors. While they can generate natural looking images, they fail to recover high frequency details from the scene due to lack of information. A burst, on the other hand, contains multiple images of the scene captured successively. Due to natural hand motion, each of these images provide a different sampling of the underlying scene. This raises the possibility of using information from these multiple images to generate a high resolution output. We tackle this burst super resolution problem in this work. Our model takes the raw burst as input. Each image in the burst is first passed through an encoder to obtain deep image embeddings. Next, we align each of the image embeddings to a common reference image in order to compensate for camera and object motion. The alignment is performed by computing pixel-wise displacement vectors between the reference image and the current image using an optical flow network. The aligned embeddings are then merged together using the fusion module and passed through the decoder to obtain the super resolved RGB image. Next, we describe our fusion module in more detail. Ideally, the fusion module should be able to merge an arbitrary number of input images. Furthermore, it must be robust to possible alignment errors due to inaccurate optical flow estimation. While simple pooling operations such as average pool or max pool can satisfy the first property, they lack the flexibility to tackle the latter issue. Thus, we employ an adaptive weighted sum-based fusion approach in this work. For each image, we first obtain element-wise fusion weights, which are multiplied with the image embeddings and then summed together to obtain the merged output. The fusion weights are predicted adaptively by the weight predictor module using three sources of information. Firstly, the reference image embeddings, which contains information about the local image structure. Secondly, the residual between the aligned embeddings and the reference embedding, which can indicate possible alignment errors. And finally, the subpixel sampling location of data. The fusion weights allows us to adaptively merge the input images to obtain good performance. In order to train and validate our approach on real-world bursts, we also introduce a dataset named Burst SR. Our dataset consists of raw images captured from a handheld camera. For each burst, we also capture a high-resolution ground truth using a DSLR with a zoom lens. We collect 200 burst sequences with diverse scenes, where each burst contains 14 raw images. Our model is first pre-trained on synthetically generated bursts. Next, we fine-tune it on the training split of our Burst SR dataset using an L1 loss. Note that as the bursts and the HR images in our dataset are captured using different cameras, there exist spatial and color misalignments between the two. In order to handle this, we warp the network predictions to the HR ground truth and perform a color space transformation before computing our loss. Next, we briefly look at our results. All our experiments are performed for super resolution by a factor of 4. First, we investigate the impact of number of input images. We observe that the performance of our model improves consistently with increasing burst size. When using a burst with 14 images, our model outperforms a single image baseline by over 2.7 dB in PSNR. Next, we evaluate alternate fusion approaches, namely average pool, max pool, and concatenation. We observe that our adaptive weighted sum fusion provides the best results. We also conducted a user study on Burst SR test set to compare our method with other single-frame and multi-frame approaches. The users were asked to rank the predictions of all methods for each image crop. We obtained 5 independent rankings for each of the 300 crops. Our approach obtains the best mean rank. Furthermore, the output of our method was ranked as the best among all methods in over 53% of the times. Finally, here is a visual comparison with a single image baseline. We observe that our approach can better recover high frequency details by fusing information from multiple images. Thank you.
Our paper called Quantifying Explainers of Graph Neural Networks in Computational Pathology. So before starting, I would like to acknowledge all the people that were involved in this project, from the data acquisition to the modeling and computational part. So most of the work in computational pathology rely on CNNs that directly operate on the original image, so basically on the pixels. And there are at least 2 limitations by following this paradigm. The first one is that CNNs operate on fixed size patches, which is leading to a trade-off between context and resolution. The second limitation, and the one we are focusing on in this paper, is that pixel-based processing is completely detached from any biological reasoning. And this is making the interpretation of the deep learning predictions pretty hard. So what we propose is to shift the tissue analysis from pixel-based to entity-based. For instance, we can decompose our image into nuclei. And these entities can further be connected to each other to form graphs, for instance, to create cell graphs. And by doing so, the input is now biologically defined, and pathologists can easily relate to it. So we now have a better presentation on top of which we can train a deep learning system for classification or for any downstream task. So all our experiments were tested on a new dataset called BRAX that includes around 4,000 regions of interest. In this paper, we use the 3-class version where we group tumor subtypes into benign, atypical, and malignant classes. This dataset is now public and can fully be used for research purposes. So let's take a look at the proposed explainability pipeline. So given a set of histology images, we can train a graph neural network to classify the cell graph representations. Then we use this classification result along with the pre-trained graph neural network to derive nuclei-level importance scores that would simply tell you how important each node is in order to make the prediction. Then at this stage, we can already do a qualitative analysis by visualizing the importance scores for each nuclei in the tissue. So again, by building entity graphs, we made our input space interpretable. And you have an example here of what is happening in a CNN and in the GNN. So we see that CNN's activated regions would have really poor spatial resolution, and we cannot really tell which nuclei are important. On the other side, in the cell graph, we can clearly identify which ones are important. In this work, we have used 4 different graph explainers. Namely, we have used GraphGradCam, which is an extension of the popular GradCam algorithm. Then we have used GraphGradCam++, which is an extension of GradCam++. Then GraphLRP, an extension of the layer-wise relevance propagation algorithm. And finally, we have used the GNN explainer. So at this stage, we would like to go beyond qualitative analysis and see if we can quantify the explanation quality given by the different explainers. So to achieve this, we extract a set of pathologically relevant concepts on the most important nuclei, and we try to understand the alignment with prior knowledge to derive quantitative metrics. Specifically, we extract the shape, size, chromatin, etc. of the most important nuclei on the entire test set. And by studying the distribution of each concept, we are able to first quantify and identify which graph explainer is better. And second, we are able to understand what are the concepts that seem to be implicitly used by our neural network. For instance, knowing if the nuclei shape is more used than the nuclei size for distinguishing benign from atypical samples. So I don't have the time to offer an in-depth presentation of the quantitative analysis, but I invite you to take the paper for more details. So wrapping up, the first point is that by conducting our analysis at the biological entity level, we are able to better explain our predictions. We can also quantify the relevance of the explanations using prior pathological knowledge, allowing us to rigorously rank different graph explainers. So we have open sourced the code, and we have also created a Python library called histocartography that is used for working with graphs and histology images. So feel free to check it out and use it. With this, I'd like to thank you all for your attention. I'll be happy to answer your questions during the poster session. Thanks.